Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be speaking about 7 PCOS diet myths. Because there is just so much information, it's difficult to know what you should follow. So in this video I hope to identify some of these PCOS diet myths and like bust them because there's just a lot of myths. There's a lot of, eat this, don't eat this, this is bad, everyone should avoid this. So let's get into the first PCOS diet myth. And that one is dairy. Now I have a whole video on dairy for PCOS and whether you should avoid it, and you can click the video here to check that out. But this is a food that you don't have to avoid. It's not a bad food. So I'm not going to go fully into dairy because I do have that full video on it, but I do want to quickly summarize and just, address some of those key points. So some of the key benefits of dairy is that it's high in calcium. And so here's the thing, around 70% of women with PCOS suffer from insulin resistance, and research shows that insulin resistance is associated with an increase in parathyroid hormone, PCH levels. So parathyroid hormone is released by the parathyroid gland, and its role is to control calcium levels in the body. Now, high PTH levels cause bones to release calcium into the blood, and the constant loss of calcium from bones increases the risk of osteoporosis. Also, constantly high levels of PTH can cause and increase the release of interleukin 6, which is an inflammatory cytokine. So by not consuming enough calcium, which you get a large amount of calcium from dairy, we are increasing the risk of high PTH levels, which can cause the risk of osteoporosis, and high levels of inflammation, which again, inflammation causes a whole host of other issues in the body. Researchers have found calcium found in dairy products are more bioavailable and absorbable in the body. Experts suggest that the bioavailability of calcium from milk and milk products is in the region of 30% compared to 5% from spinach, for example. Some plant foods also contain oxalic acid, phytic acid, and uronic acid, which inhibit the absorption of calcium. As a result, they are not considered bioavailable sources of calcium. Dairy is also a complete source of protein, which obviously we want to be making sure that when we do consume protein that it does have the whole profile, the whole amino acid profile, because all of these amino acids are necessary within the body. Now, touching some of those drawbacks that cause people to avoid dairy, and some of the reasons why I personally was swayed to avoid it was, number one, that dairy can cause inflammation. So to kind of counteract that argument of that dairy causes inflammation is then choose A2 casein. There's two types of casein, A1 casein and A2 casein. A1 casein is mostly found in cow's milk, but A2 casein is found mostly in goats, sheep, buffalo, and also some breeds of cow's milk like Normandys and Guernsey and Brown Swiss. So choose an A2 casein because it's not inflammatory. Now, we cannot fully avoid some of the hormones found in milk, like estrogen, because it's just naturally found there, and it's quite low, so it's not high enough to be causing us any harm. When it comes to bovine growth hormone, well, this has actually been banned in some countries, including in the EU, Canada, and Japan, but it's still permitted in the United States. So to avoid these growth hormones, especially if you live in the United States, then you can look for organic milk or milk that has been labelled as hormone-free. Milk labelled as organic comes from cows that have not been treated with man-made hormones or antibiotics. Moving on to PCOS diet myth number 2 is gluten. Now, this, dairy and gluten, they often come together as foods to avoid. A lot of people in the PCOS community are speaking about how both these foods should be eliminated from the diet, and I have made a video about a week ago or so talking about how I have avoided gluten. I'm currently gluten-free, But before you say, well, why are you talking about it as a diet myth? Now go check out that video. I do go into detail about why I've avoided it. I want to touch on why it's not necessary to be avoided by everyone. Gluten isn't bad. It's basically how it's the change in how our modern society is producing wheat. It's hybridized, it's mass production, it's fortified, it's pesticides, chemicals have been used. So it's making wheat products even more difficult to break down and cause a lot more kind of gut irritation, and therefore bloating and endotoxins. Now most people do fine digesting gluten. It's just some people who do struggle. It could also be because of a poor digestive function. There's no research, there's no firm conclusive evidence that suggests that women with PCOS need to avoid gluten. So it's not that everyone needs to avoid gluten. Yes, if you are experiencing gluten intolerance symptoms, as I explained in that video, then avoiding it for 30 days to see if you see any improvement would be a great way to see if, if my symptoms improve, I don't experience those symptoms, then I have a problem and I have to address the root cause. So if you do avoid it for 30 days and you realize that, I don't feel any different, there's no change, then you do fine with gluten. You don't have to avoid it. The third diet myth is that you need to follow intermittent fasting for PCOS. I don't think women with PCOS or women of reproductive age should follow intermittent fasting. Firstly, there is no research done on women in their reproductive age following intermittent fasting. Most of the research done, which shows the benefits of intermittent fasting, is done on men. And the research that has been done on women shows negative effects. A 2005 study just concluded that intermittent fasting enhanced insulin sensitivity in men, but worsened in women. When we go long periods of time without eating, we put a lot of stress on the adrenals, on our liver, and we slow down the metabolism because we are suppressing the thyroid. Because the thyroid, to support the thyroid, we need to be eating every 3 to 4 hours within 30 minutes to 1 hour of waking up, and making sure that stress hormones do not rise. Through following these principles of eating regularly, eating balanced meals, and not following intermittent fasting, we're keeping stress levels low. Because if we're fasting, then a lot of people think that they feel perfectly fine, that they've got all this energy. It's because you're running on stress hormones, and these stress hormones are suppressing the thyroid. And the longer you do this, the worse your thyroid becomes, and then after, it might take a few years for you to feel the full effects of a damaged thyroid. These things don't happen, like that. It takes time. So you feel fine because you're running off stress hormones, you're running off adrenaline, you get all this, in that kind of fight or flight kind of state, or just on the go, high alert. So by just simply providing the body with a constant supply of energy, stokes, the fire, your metabolism, keeping your metabolism high and supporting your thyroid, which is super important for our overall health, including from metabolism to making sure that we're ovulating, producing hormones, detoxifying. The fourth PCOS diet myth is that you need to go keto or go low carb. Now again, this follows on from the point I've just mentioned about intermittent fasting, how it's important to make sure that you're providing the body with a constant supply of sugar and not fearing sugar carbohydrates. And I have 2 videos talking about carbohydrates and sugar. One is answering the question of should you avoid carbohydrates if you have PCOS, and the second is on beating sugar cravings and why you get sugar cravings and how to stop having sugar cravings. Spoiler, it's just eat the sugar. If we don't provide our body with sugar, then we're going to go through a process of gluconeogenesis and break down our muscle, protein, organs, connective tissue to create that sugar. Now, we need sugar for various reasons, including just some of the key points here. In the liver, we need glucose to convert T4, which is the inactive thyroid hormone, into T3. So that's done in the liver, and to do this we need glucose. some tissues and organs in the body, like red blood cells, the retina, need glucose because they do not have a mitochondria. A lot of people state that we don't need sugar, we don't need carbs, because we can utilize fat stores for energy. And the problem here is that when sugar is oxidized, it doesn't create any toxic byproducts. But when we break down protein and fat, they create toxic byproducts. Cortisol only rises when we don't have enough to meet the energetic demand, to meet the increase. The body has to find glucose from somewhere, so it's going to break down something to get it. The fifth PCOS diet myth is that coffee has to be avoided. Like, coffee is this bad drink. So again, I have a full video on coffee, which you can click the link here. But to summarize, some of the key great benefits of caffeine, and then touch on why a lot of people say coffee or caffeine is bad. So the first one is that coffee supports thyroid function. Dr. AP has an article on which talks about caffeine, and he states that caffeine is actually very similar to thyroid hormone, in which he states coffee supports thyroid function and increases the metabolic rate. Caffeine increases the cellular consumption of glucose, which is caused when the metabolism increases. So you use glucose much faster. Because caffeine increases the metabolism, it also raises your need for nutrients. So because caffeine increases the metabolic rate, we need to make sure that before we drink coffee, we have consumed enough food, enough sugar, enough nutrients to meet that increase in the metabolic rate, to meet the increase in energetic demand. So when we don't consume enough food, enough enough sugar, then it's obvious that cortisol levels are going to rise to break down tissues and organs and fat to create that glucose it needs to meet the energetic demand. So it's not that coffee is bad, it's that people are not consuming it in a way that it's supportive to the metabolism. People drink it black, they drink it on an empty stomach, and especially if you're doing intermittent fasting, a lot of people, those two are like combined, and that's why they feel really bad. So it's not that caffeine is bad, it's just people are not drinking it in a healthy way, in an optimal way. The sixth diet myth is that fruit fruit juices are evil. This is completely false. Fruit is not bad. I hear so many times people say that you need to minimize your fruit consumption to only one fruit a day. Now, I touch on fruit in my carbohydrates for PCOS video, which again is in the description box down below. But fructose is more thermogenic than glucose, and it has little effect on blood sugar and insulin. This is because when we consume fructose, it has actually been shown to increase insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism because it enters the cell without the assistance of insulin and can be used as energy. When we consume glucose, there's a powerful insulin secretion. So making sure that we consume more fructose, you don't have to fear fruit juice. Juices like orange and pineapple juice and grapefruit are definitely a great option in, blending or juicing some vegetables, because vegetables are more of a gut irritant. They have other kind of chemicals. Plants have chemicals to protect them from animals, predators that are going to avoid eating them. So they have oxalates, phytic acid, they're polyunsaturated fats. So and they can, all this stuff can cause a lot of gut irritation. So consuming fruit juices are definitely a greater source. If you're going to have anything fruit juice or vegetable, go for the fruit juice. And the final piece of diet myth, number 7, is the idea that you should avoid saturated fat. Now you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? Saturated fat is bad, saturated fat causes heart disease, saturated fat causes weight gain, saturated fat is just bad, and I've touched on this in my 10 foods for PCOS weight loss. Click the card here to check it out. I go into detail on saturated fats and why they're so great for our health and metabolism. But to summarize, saturated fats are stable and they don't go rancid or oxidize compared to unsaturated fats like polyunsaturated fats, PUFAs, which are vegetables like your rapeseed, canola oil, sunflower oil, sesame seed oil, almond oil. These are unstable when exposed to oxygen, heat and light. So here's the thing, the average body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are constantly exposed to sunlight and heat, oxygen. So when we eat or cook PUFAs, oxidization occurs, and this leads to the creation of free radicals, and this can cause inflammation, which can cause damage to the body. Dr. Repeat speaks about unsaturated oils in an article, and he speaks about how unsaturated oils tends to lower the blood sugar in at least 3 basic ways. It damages mitochondria, it suppresses the activity of the respiratory enzyme, and it tends to direct carbohydrate into fat production. So swap your unsaturated fats, your PUFAs, ditch those, avoid those vegetable oils, don't cook with them, throw them away, don't even buy them, and try and avoid buying foods that have PUFAs. These are very, very much found in a lot of packaged and processed foods, and minimize consumption of beans and legumes as much as you can. And choose your saturated fats like your coconut oil, your grass-fed butter, your beef tallow, your ghee. These are so much more better for metabolism. They help you increase the metabolic rate, sustain your blood sugar levels, and help the thyroid. That's in the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the information I shared has you thinking, and obviously, you'll take what I said, do a bit more research, and do experiment, and just take everything you read online about everything people say about avoid this and avoid that and how this is bad and that is bad with a grain of salt, touching of salt. As a bonus PCOS diet myth is that salt is bad. I also touched on this in my 7 foods to boost your metabolism, but that's just another food, I guess, is a diet myth that salt is bad, and it's not. Salt can actually help increase blood volume, stress hormones low, and increases the metabolism. So that's just a quick little bonus. If you want to find out more about salt, check that video out. I'll have it linked in the description box down below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, share the video, and subscribe for plenty more videos. And I will catch you in the next one.